Welcome, welcome. Please come on in. Welcome to the 2021 CCATT Annual Conference and BOTI. Can you believe it? We're back together, face to face. It's amazing. This is our very first back face-to-face meeting in some very long time. So thank you so very much for coming out. And we got an overwhelming response that you all wanted to be together and you wanted to have your conference again. And so thank you so very much for turning out. We've planned a great 3 days for you. I'm really excited to get going on that. But just before we jump in, I wanted to have two really important people come in and welcome you. First, we have Mr. Jacob Friday, who is the president and CEO of TAC. And we also have Ms. Carol Scott, who is the trustee, the chair of the board at Del Mar College, as well as the chair of CCATT. So please, Jacob and Carol, come give your words of welcome.
Buenas tardes. So our colleague, Dr. Gonzalez and Dr. Farrell have asked me to provide some welcome remarks with an emphasis on brevity. So, always a challenge. Bienvenidos. Welcome to our reunion of sorts. It is so very good to see you. I have to say, it's a bit of an irony in having to see you after all these months and then wearing a mask and then having your glasses fog up and then I can't see you. But it is so very good to see you and we so are very happy that you are here. Very grateful for you to be able to leave your respective homes, your families, your communities to spend some quality time with your colleagues, new and previous colleagues. And I would just want to say to each of you, thank you for venturing here and to visit with us. So important for us in the days ahead, in the months ahead, to work together as one united family on behalf of all 50 colleges and on behalf of all 750,000 students whom we serve. That unity is important, not just because legislators and policymakers need to see us as one reinforcing mode, but also that unity is important because we have an obligation to serve all of our students together, whether the students come from deep East Texas or deep West Texas or the Panhandle or the deepest part of South Texas in Brownsville. All of our students are important to us, and this is what today's conversations are about. I would be remiss if I did not first start us off by saying that your TAC team, your CCATT team, and your Texas Success Center team have been working fearlessly, tirelessly over the last several months to get us to this day. So to them I say thank you for getting us ready, and to you I say welcome. Thank you.
Gosh, it is good to see everyone. I have been smiling under my mask all morning because like everyone else, it is such a wonderful opportunity to be together again. I'm Carol Scott. I am chair of the Community College Association of Texas Trustees and very, very happy to be here today. I have been on the Del Mar College Board in Corpus Christi for 7 years. I've got some colleagues around the room. Several of our colleagues have joined us from Del Mar, and so thank you all for supporting me in this continued work on behalf of the state. I would like to ask your CCATT Board of Directors if they are present to stand and give a wave. All of you stand at one time and give a wave. Jay Barrett is not with us. I'm going to introduce you by name. Jay Beard is actually joining us virtually. We have Bill Greenhill from Tarrant County College, who is our immediate past chair. Armand Cantini is joining us virtually. Annette Carlisle with Amarillo College is here. Joe Carrington I don't see him here yet. We have Nicole Eversman with Austin Community College over there. Danny Gertzen with Wharton County Junior College. Carla Metzler is joining us virtually. Bonnie Nahara with El Paso Community College is here. Paul Rodriguez with South Texas College. I don't see Paul here. Ron Walker with Victoria College. Thank you all for your work. In the middle of the pandemic, your CATT board has worked very hard to continue to offer programming for you all, and I want to thank them for that incredible effort. For many of you, this is your first time to meet Dr. Manuel Gonzalez, who is the director of the trustee organization. Manny, where are you? There he is in the back with his mask on, Manny Gonzalez. Manny joined us in January of 2020, and within a couple of months, Jacob sent everybody home as the rest of us all went home to work virtually. And so this is, we actually did have 2 in-person opportunities before COVID shut everything down. He was with us at the ACCT National Legislative Conference in February of that year, and then we were able to have a trustee leadership seminar in Texas, South Texas College, that year as well. But this is his first conference and his first opportunity to meet a number of you face to face. So I hope you all will give him an extra handshake because he has done an incredible job as a new employee, new to the association, and I just want to thank him for all of his hard work and his patience with all of us over the last year and a half. Other words of welcome and thanks to the founders of this organization. We have the CATT Association is about 10 years old or so at this point, but we were founded by some very visionary folks who wanted to find a way to help involve our trustees at the advocacy level, provide professional development, as well as engagement and networking for our trustees across the state. Marie Flickinger with San Jacinto College was our founding president. Lydia Santibanez with Temple College is our past president. Raymond Lewis with Galveston. I'm not sure if Raymond's here. That's right. And of course, Bill Greenhill. So, yes, our own Bill Greenhill. So I want to encourage you, there are some of you who have been in this room with us for the past decade plus and have been in this room for much longer than I have. There are some of you who are brand new to this room, who got elected in November, maybe in May, and this is your first CATT conference ever. Regardless of your tenure on your local board, I want to encourage your involvement with your state association. We represent the 403 elected regents and trustees across the state. We had a newly elected trustee luncheon today to welcome those folks to their position and provide a little bit of orientation. And I shared this with them, and this is something that your board has thought about in our strategic planning over the last several years. We are the only elected officials in higher education in the state of Texas. And so we represent a very important connection between our local taxpayers and voters, between representing our students and our faculty, representing businesses and those who hire our graduates, and making that connection between local public education, local secondary education, and higher education, both in our institutions and beyond. So you are very important in your leadership positions across your communities, and I thank you for being here today to learn about quality governance, to learn about student success data, to learn about what your peers are doing in excellence across the state, and I thank you for that. I also want to encourage you to get involved with the association. We do our work across advocacy, engagement, and education, as I said, and we have committees that are involved in all 3 of those areas. If you would like to get more involved, please let me know. Please stop. The reason I introduced the board members, I wanted you to see who they were. Please let us know because we'd love to help you get more engaged in the association. Our goals for this conference are many-fold, but first and foremost, it is to help you with understanding, knowledge on how to be an effective policymaker at the local level. The theme Leading Together is an opportunity for us, along with your CEOs, to experience and to learn how to ask questions, to understand, dig into the data, and to, again, hear opportunities and learn from your fellow regents across the state. We hope that as a result of your participation, you will support a culture of change at your colleges. You'll learn to monitor the information that matters, and that you'll help set the strategic direction for student success at each one of your organizations. We have a very robust couple of days ahead of us. Thank you all again for being here today, and please seek me out. Let's talk, let's network, let me answer questions and help connect you with what is going on across the state. Thank you again, and I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Farrell, who will introduce our speaker. Thank you all.
We have great leadership in Texas, so thank you so very much to Jacob and to Carol and for all those that help us get here. I just wanted to say one more thing about the ability for us to be together for the first time. This is so exciting. Not only are we able to be together when the pandemic has kept us apart for so long, but this is the most attended Board of Trustee Institute since it started in 2007, which is amazing. Thank you so very much. So the only other line I would like to add to that is to please wear your masks. We know we can't have a mandate. We don't want to start any court cases over this. But we do ask, please, when you're not eating, but when you're indoors and with others, if you would please wear your mask, we'd really appreciate that. Thank you so very much for that. So what I want to do is just give you a little bit of a preview of what we're going to be doing and why it's so important that we have a Board of Trustees Institute. So first of all three of our units, the Texas Association of Community Colleges, the Community College Association of Texas Trustees, and the Success Center that is housed under one roof at TAC. We are all three dedicated to one thing, and that's the socioeconomic mobility of Texans. And so we come alongside you in your work to try to help students be successful because we're trying to help our fellow Texans and those people in our communities do better for themselves and for their families. And so we will continue to be dedicated to this mission of socioeconomic mobility no matter what conference you come to, no matter what meeting you come to. This is the underlying purpose of why we come together and care about one another. So I wanted to tell you just a little bit about the legacy of the BOTI. Some of you have been to either all BOTIs since 2007 or nearly all, and others, this is the first time you've ever come to one. So let me just back up and say, this is a little different BOTI, Board of Trustees Institute, because we've partnered with the Community College Association of Texas Trustees in your annual conference. So we've billed them together, but we very much are upholding the purposes for both events, with your business meetings and supporting your association and those being engaged in your association, but also very much staying true to what we have done for so many years with the Board of Trustees Institute, which is focused clearly on student success and what is the role of the board in helping to support the promotion of student success. And so we have partnered together with the association many months preparing for this three-day event. So you know, Carol mentioned we had a whole series of webinars, monthly webinars starting in January that covered topics that would lead us to this point. And then we have planned an agenda for you over the next 3 days that is not so much like any other conference you might have attended for some other purpose, but very much an orchestrated set of conversations that leads to the moment in time, the most important moment in our 3 days, which is Saturday morning, just the last session just before noon, when you sit together with your team and you plan what are the actions that we're going to commit to when we go home. Now, we realize you don't have your full board with you, some of you, and so you're not committing in an official policy level way, but you're committing amongst yourselves that the orchestrated set of conversations that you've had while you were together in Austin moved you in a way that you're able to make some commitments to the kinds of conversations you're going to have as a full board, of changes you may want to make when you get home, whether that's, and we've seen changes across Texas. We've been doing the Board of Trustees Institute for so long that we are able to document some really great colleges that have made some great changes. You've changed your vision statements to make them more focused on student success. You've changed your strategic plans around student success. You've changed the way you budget and approve budgets because you are more focused on student success than you've ever been in the past. And so over all the years we've been having the Board of Trustees Institute, 3 themes seem to keep resonating and we keep repeating and encouraging with one another. And that is that the boards support a culture for change. What is it that you do to help your college make change? It's like moving a mountain sometimes to make change, but it can be done, especially when you have the backing of your board. We also have learned that boards that are effective monitor what matters. So you're going to hear a lot about data when you come to a Board of Trustees Institute. And then thirdly, boards set the strategic direction. so that the college knows where we're going forward to make change so that we can impact more people's lives, because we've been in charge. We were at the helm at this moment, and we were able to help more people have successful lives because we were working so hard for them. So you will always hear those themes every time you come to the Board of Trustees Institute. And in fact, the next 3 days are set up to reinforce these 3 things over and again about your role and about what you're going to be able to do when you go home. And so I hope that these 3 things show up in your commitment to action that you put together on Saturday morning together. So with that, I'm going to cover just a few things that you should have been seeing at your college. So I appreciate so much when I see different CEOs and trustees come up to me and you tell me about the pathways work that you're doing. Absolutely 100% Texas is a guided pathways state. You all have committed to the hard, heavy lift work of implementing guided pathways. And I know that every single one of you have heard guided pathways. I probably don't even have to explain to you what I mean when I talk about guided pathways. Everyone is committed to this because we know that these are the right things to do, and we're beginning to measure that they are making great impact on students' lives, on their success, and that we're beginning to close the gaps that we have struggled to close for so very long. And so when you see this model, you know Texas is about guided pathways. We're about reaching students that come from lots of different places, definitely K-12, making sure we get dual credit and transferring from, matriculating from high school into higher ed. But also there are a lot of other populations in our communities that we're reaching, adults who are in basic literacy programs, those who are unemployed. Definitely a big set of adults in our communities that need us to be very focused on their success and their quick success so they can get back to work. And so all of this is geared around getting students to their end goals, which is a good job that pays family-sustaining wages, and the opportunity for further education so they can get even better jobs. Very quickly, I couldn't get up here without at least sharing one piece of data. We are starting to measure success of, this is statewide data, the impact that all of you are collectively making on student success. And I'll just very quickly say the first bar chart you see is how many first-time in college students are completing at least 6 or more hours in their first term. So this is important for momentum, right? The first dark blue bar is in 2013, and then 2 years later, 2015, and 2 years later, 2017, and then the third bar, 2019. So this is pre-pathways, getting started on pathways, and then 2 years into pathways, and you can see that it is statistically significant improvement in students completing more hours. So not only is it up 9%, right? But you translate that into the numbers of people. So in 2019, 14,351 more Texans completed 6 hours or more in their very first term. That's progress. I know it's early and we want more, but that's progress. So congratulate yourself on that. So this other one, we really want to make a big impact on. It's the first time in college students who are completing a college-level math course in their first year. We've talked about this for so many years. We've done so poorly in the single digits on this one, and especially the equity problem with this student success indicator has been dismal for years and years and years. But we are seeing that pre-pathways, early pathways, and at least the first couple of years in pathways, we are beginning to close the gaps. And so it is also up a statistically significant amount, 8 percentage points better than we were in 2013, which translates to another 11,516 students who are completing college-level math in their first year. So thank you so much for the work that you've done to improve the lives of students, for improving their circumstances when they come to you. By changing your college to meet the needs of students, it's starting to show. But we are nowhere near where we need to be, and there is so much more to be done. And that's why we're here today. And we will be here tomorrow, and we'll be here on Saturday, and we'll be encouraging each other in those good works. And so with that, I'm going to then introduce our speaker for this afternoon. Dr. Byron McClenney, I'm sure, is no stranger to anyone in the room because he has been such a great friend to Texas. He's been such a great friend to community colleges. He's been a good friend of mine, and I really appreciate the work that he has done. He served as the founder of the Board of Trustees Institute. The whole reason we have this is because he started it, and we have great funders who have continued to be committed to it because of the impact that it's had. He currently serves as the former chair of the community college, the Colorado Community College System, and still serves on that board and still does a lot of work. And you know, many of you have had him come do trustee retreats with you, and so you know his work. And so I will just finish with this, Byron. If there was ever one thing we always said at the end of every trustee institute or anything that we had written together, Byron's words would be, "You know what to do, now go do it." So with that, help me welcome Byron McClenney, please.
Thank you very much, Cynthia. What a pleasure it is for me to be here today. Just thinking back on where we started back in 2007 with this group and looking at the math data, I just want to congratulate you on an enormous shift from 2007. Not a state in the country has done what you've done in college math, and that is terrific, because there was nothing that prevented student success any more than the failure to complete an appropriate college math course in the first year. Nothing. So you've been working on a lot of other things, but that is a very significant contribution that you're making to your communities and to the lives of many more people, because they're succeeding now where before they would not have been succeeding. So you should all give yourselves a big round of applause on that one. Really, really dramatic. Just two quick observations before I plunge in here. One is that I doubt that there's a single person in the room today who would say, I don't want our college or our colleges to be great. I suspect that all of you have that aspiration. And what I've learned after all these years is that you do not achieve greatness and sustain greatness without a great board. That's on you, folks, but that's it. So if you truly want great colleges, then do everything in your power to have a great board, functioning well, doing what's right at the right time. The second thing I would observe is a huge shift that's occurred in the last decade or more around the country. We used to talk about student readiness for college, and we dwelled on that too much. And now, more than ever before, we're talking about our colleges student ready. Our colleges student ready. That is a huge shift. That's a transformational shift that is occurring. It hasn't been fully achieved, but it's occurring all over America. And so as I come to share with you today, I want you to keep those thoughts in mind. And as we begin to look at what I believe we've learned about effective boards, I want you to feel free to jump in after any point that provokes you. I am not inviting any speeches now, let me make that clear, but I will provide openings for brief observations and questions at any point while we're talking about becoming effective boards. Just no speeches, please. I've been known to get out and kind of wander around during presentations like this, and I'm not going to do that today because of pandemic circumstances, and I'll admit that I'm just a little apprehensive. My oldest son, who was fully vaccinated, just came through a COVID case in the last 2 weeks. And that's a shock when somebody that close to you, fully vaccinated, has that experience. So I'm a little apprehensive, and Kay and I, as we come to be with you, don't intend to be antisocial, but if we do anything while we're here that is seen that way, please don't interpret it that way. When my son called me to tell me about his COVID case, it kind of blew me out of my chair. So anyway, with that, let's take a look at what I believe we've learned. And the first point here causes me to say, in your folder, there is a one-pager that corresponds with the PowerPoint slides. And I want to invite you to pull that out. And as I talk about each point, I hope you'll make a note to yourselves about each point here in a way to say, yes, we're doing that now, no worry, or we're not doing that now, or a question mark, wonder how we're doing, but make some notes to yourselves about each point so that you can go back and look at what you've observed as I'm talking today in your group sessions. So please pull it out and pull your pen out and make notes to yourselves about each point here and the extent to which your board corresponds with the point I'm trying to make. And if you disagree with one of the points that I'm making, I'll give you an opening to say that at any point where you'd like to say that. So with that, let's plunge right in. And this first point about whether or not you have a collective vision of your potential future. Maybe it's a master plan, maybe it's a strategic plan, maybe it's a vision for the future, whatever you call it. Do you have it? And do you regularly update it? I spent a lot of years consulting around the land with colleges on strategic planning. And I remember vividly over the years being blown away by colleges that created a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan, and they never looked at it until those years had elapsed. And then you look back and say, well, did we do it or not? And that is not the way I'm wanting you to think about a vision for the future. So does your board work at being together around the college district that you want to create? And do you update it in a way that allows you to always be on target? And who could have ever predicted all the transformations that occurred as this pandemic hit us? We were sailing along in such great shape as colleges around the country, in Texas for sure, and all of a sudden in March of that first year of the pandemic, the life that we lived was turned upside down. And I don't have to tell you what that's been like over the last 18 months. And so there's never been a better time, quite frankly, for you to revisit your vision for the future coming out of the worst of the pandemic. And let's hope we are, in fact, coming out of the worst of the pandemic. I'm not sure we are, but I hope we are. But do you have that? And is it current? And do you regularly update it so you're never in doubt about where you're heading as a college district or as an individual college? So whatever you think about your own situation, make a mark on that one to remind yourselves of points you want to discuss later when you're together in your breakout session. You won't be great without this. You won't be great without it. Second, have you made student success with equity a central priority to all that you do? This idea of student success with equity in the history of community colleges, unfortunately, is a new idea. Now, for many of you, it's not a new idea, thankfully. I remember vividly that first BOTI event in 2007 as we talked about, in particular, math data. And I remember the startled looks on faces of board members around the room as you realized that many of your colleges had only a single-digit success rate after a year or two from the point of entry to completing a successful math course. That's just one tiny example of a measure that you might take. And as we began to look at disaggregated data and began to ask about whether or not there are groups that we're not serving well, and in fact, you're going to be asked that while you're here this 3-day period. But have you made student success with equity front and center? I would suggest that we really can't talk about student success without the recognition of the need to close all the gaps that exist between the people of any stripe that we come to serve. No gaps ought to be what we're after. Male, female, part-time, full-time, race, ethnicity, Pell status, whatever you want to choose, we ought to be trying to close every one of the performance gaps that we might identify as we look at our colleges. And many of you have been doing that for years, so I am not judging you in any way as I reinforce the importance of this. But again, make a note about whether or not you think this is true for your college district today. Have you made student success with equity a central priority? Third, does this vision, this plan, this look at the future fully address the needs of your service area? Think about that one, particularly as you get into your breakout groups. What do you do to be sure, as you look at the various service areas that you have in the state of Texas, to ensure that, in fact, everything you're doing takes into account that service area and all that you discover out there? I can remember vividly in my own experience in another American city when I started trying to do this work in a new community where I had gone as a CEO, and started looking at data, and we tracked virtually everything to income by elementary school in a particular city. And you could look at the differences by census tract, for example, and look at income levels by census tract, and look at student success by census tract, and it told a whole story that said as a community college in that area, we had to be alert to all of that and to take on all of that if we were going to be a successful community college. So I hope that you have periodic conversations in your board meetings that allow you to really examine whether or not you're up to speed on this one. Maybe 5 years ago or 10 years ago, you took a thorough look at the service area and created a strategic plan out of all of that, but have you updated the changes that have occurred over time? You know that, but again, give yourself a mark by the number on your page there, and remember to talk about it if you think there's any concern at all about whether or not you are really on top of this question about are we really serving the needs of our service area with all that we do, and more than all we say, but all that we do. Fourth, do we conduct regular reviews of policies to support student success? Maybe we have some areas where we need a policy and don't have it. Maybe we have policies that are in place that inhibit student success. And we need to think about that and talk about that and examine whether or not we have that situation. Now, I'm not suggesting that board members delve into this work internally, but I would expect that you would want your CEO to bring to you, annually at least, a look at whether or not we have areas needing policy attention in order to enhance our student success with equity agenda. I don't find many boards around the country that do that well. And so I want to emphasize that for you as we begin to talk together while we're here in Austin. And finally, as we talk about this area of strategic direction, do you use retreats and study sessions to review results and focus on future priorities? I suggest to you that you can't be a great board, you can't have great colleges unless you're clear about the priorities that ought to drive your activity in the next year. If you're not all clear about what those priorities are, and when I say priorities, I'm talking about a limited set. And as I make that comment, I always think about a college that I worked with a few years ago where they said they had 28 priorities. And my response to them was to laugh. Laughed out loud. I was embarrassed that I did, but I did. And the point is, you can't have 28 priorities. I like to say that you're best off to have no more than 3. 4 is okay. 5 is the outside limit, in my view, after a half a century of trying to learn how to do this work. So the test here is, do you have a limited set of priorities that you all are clear about that emerge from the conversations that you've had? One of the most encouraging things that I've seen in community college boards around the country is that many of them, and I hope many of you, are learning how important maybe an annual retreat, maybe a biannual retreat can be, and also the importance of using study sessions as a part of a regular board meeting. During my time as a community college board chair, which was in Colorado, the state board on which I served, and by the way, I'm off now. I've done my duty to my state of Colorado. But as a 2-year chair, it was really important to have study sessions because we'd never done much of that. And we literally started every board meeting with a study session. And we had the time to talk about issues that we might not have talked about before around a certain topic. And it might be a 20-minute session, it might be a 30-minute session, but whether you do it every board meeting or not is not my point. But do you find the time to have the in-depth conversation that allows all of you to feel comfortable about what your priorities need to be and to ensure that you're on track in pursuit of those priorities? Now, having said all of that around these first 5 points, let me stop talking for a moment and see if I've triggered a reaction from somebody or a question from somebody that you'd like to toss out there for everybody to think about. And don't be shy. And I don't mind silence for just a moment or two. So if there's anything at all that I've triggered that you want to react to, let me give you that opening. I'm amazed. All right. Yes.
May I ask a question on number 3? Not perhaps
Sure.
too uncontroversial. On number 3, do you really mean all service area? And do you mean equally or proportionally?
My answer is Byron McClenney's answer, and there might be others who disagree with me. But anywhere I've ever served, I've tried to satisfy myself that we were fully in touch with the needs of the service area, period, across the board. And while there might be a priority one year that we're pursuing because of a certain set of needs, but I want us to serve well all of those that we're in business to serve. That's my answer. And I'd invite an opening for anybody else to take a different point of view on that. I know there are issues in Texas around boundaries. And I spent a lot of my time in the early going when I was chancellor in the Alamo district expanding boundaries. And I could tell you stories for hours about what that was like. I won't do it. But wherever those boundary lines are drawn, let's serve everybody within them as best we can.
I had a question regarding your concept of study sessions. Can you
Yes.
expand a little bit more on what you mean by that?
It's just the notion of blocking out a little bit of time that allows you to identify a topic that you want everybody to understand. And it might be related to one of the three to five priorities that are in place. It might be a study area that's emerging. And so the idea of just saying, at some point during a board agenda, whether it's at the beginning or the end or somewhere in the middle, setting aside 20 or 30 minutes to have a conversation makes a huge difference in the way people stay on the same page relative to priorities. In my Colorado experience, we usually went no less than 20 minutes. Sometimes we took half an hour to have that conversation. And then we'd convene the official meeting and get into the agenda. Does that help? Thank you. Anybody else want to jump in here? All right, thank you for those. Let me see if I can get this to jump ahead. Here we go. Create a culture for change and transformation. And as you think about where you've been as a college district or as a board, are you aware during this period of transformation about the major changes occurring in the world of community colleges? It is dramatic what has happened across America. First of all, around this issue around developmental education, basic skills, remedial education. The conversation we had with the BOTI group in 2007 is totally out of date. The world has changed dramatically since then. And are you on top of that? Are you aware of whether or not there are still areas of struggle for students who come to college not fully prepared, and how you're dealing with that? But know that, in fact, there's been a revolution across America's community colleges relative to what we used to call developmental education. In many colleges, it no longer exists at all. You can't find anything called developmental education. That's the transformation. Some are in that process now, but this is huge. Many colleges over the years had 60, 70, 80% of their incoming students who so-called were not college ready. And that's why we started doing that in the first place. But a transformation has occurred, and are you in touch with that? Second, math pathways. Boy, what an enormous change has occurred there. And Texas has led the way in that. And again, I applaud you for what you've done in the realm of math. Enormous, enormous work. And I've already commended you for that, but it's awfully important. There was the day when everybody assumed that if you took college math, that meant taking college algebra. No longer, no longer. And as you talk about guided pathways, you're beginning to talk about the role for statistics quantitative reasoning, and on it goes now as we try to say, what is the appropriate mathematics for the major field that the student has chosen? Enormous shift. And I want you to be aware of the extent to which that is a transformation, a revolution that has occurred in America's community colleges. And the third one that I highlight here is guided pathways. And Cynthia's already put that one up front and center. And again, I commend you as a group of colleges in Texas for taking that on. You're providing leadership now for the country. And again, I commend you for that. That is terrific. That is multi-year work. This is not something you turn the switch on and in 1 year you've got it in place. This is a developmental process, but it's a transformational process. And board members need to be aware of the extent to which transformation is what's called for as you begin to do that work. So are you aware of the major transformative developments? Make a note to yourself about whether or not you believe you are or not. 2, and this is maybe one of the most important things I'll say today. Do you link priorities to the way you allocate or reallocate resources? And answer that one for yourself. Don't have any consultation with your neighbor. Do you as a board, when you approve an annual budget, do you in fact consciously link the priorities, which I'm suggesting should be no more than 5 and hopefully 3, do you link those priorities to the way you decide to allocate or reallocate resources? If you do that, you're on your way to greatness. You really are. I see that over and over across the country as colleges take that seriously. And that's hard to do. It's harder, by the way, in states like California, where I've spent an awful lot of time the last couple of years, where the academic senate is by legislation given certain roles in the life of a college, and they don't always like the way things are going, and they don't necessarily like the priorities that a board wants to pursue. Harder there than in many of your situations, but do you link the priorities to the allocation of resources? And I would underline reallocation. Think about the extent to which you can do new things with existing resources. Again, make a note to yourself. I see one person wanting to applaud that, and I appreciate that. This is enormous. So rate yourself on whether or not you do that. And be ready to talk about that if you have any question at all about whether or not you do that as you think about your future. This is really a really important point. This idea of strategic alliances. I've mentioned specifically K-12 and universities, but in many communities it would probably also be with the business community, depending on the needs in a particular area. But do you actively pursue the important strategic alliances? Do you have a hand-in-hand partnership as you think about what's good for students? I know many of you have been working on that, looking both ways. Links with high schools, links with universities, but I see colleges still across America that do almost none of that. So again, to what extent are you doing that, and do you feel good about that? Make a note to yourself. Maybe you don't need to talk about that because you've had that as a priority for 3 or 4 years, and that'd be great. But the community colleges that become great do this well. And that is all to the benefit of the students here in business to serve. All right? Now, this next one becomes a little more difficult. Is the board ready to support prescriptive practices? Are you willing to think about prescribing something you know that's going to help students succeed? I've given you several examples there. Orientation, advising, creation of a student plan. These are examples that, if in place and done well, will in fact increase student success. I have no doubt about that. I've seen examples of that everywhere in America that took it seriously. But then the question always comes, do you mean everybody? You really want part-time students to have an orientation? You really want part-time students to have a plan? Are you serious? Well, yeah, I am serious. And as you think about those kinds of things, this is where the guided pathways work reinforces over and over again how to do that and how to think about that. But again now, if you have any question about how it's going in your particular district, make a note to yourself on that page, and behind that item if that's an item that you need to think about and talk about. Now, it can be hard. It can be really, really hard to do that. And one thought that hits me is out of my California work, and Kay would, I think, reinforce this as I say it. We, in community colleges, have not done well in dealing with career exploration. How do students who come out of our high schools, and maybe students who have dropped out and are coming back, how do they even begin to think about what kind of career they might want to pursue? Guided Pathways causes you to think a lot about it, but as you really do it well, you're going to be thinking right up front about how to ensure that students have career exploration if they need it before they lock into some kind of plan for the future of their education. And sometimes we have to say, yes, it's important enough to require that students do certain things. If I were a college president today, I'd be arguing with the board that we should, in fact, mandate orientation for every entering student, period. I don't know too many colleges in America that can really demonstrate that they do that. If you can, wonderful. If you're not there yet, think about it. All of this is in terms of what can we do to be student ready and to ensure that students succeed. Awfully important. And finally, as you think about this, do you provide the support for your CEO to lead courageous work? Transformation does not come easily. I'll just give you one quick example that occurs every time I have these thoughts. And it is that as we think about faculty and about how they contribute, the question of how you build schedules comes to mind. So do we build schedules in terms of what students need or what faculty members desire? You with me? Student need versus faculty desire. Now, how many faculty members do you know who say, I'm willing to teach at 3 o'clock on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday? Not a hand. So think about whether or not you're willing to do that. And a CEO who does that for the first time is going to stir up a hornet's nest in some cases. But do you build schedules for the benefit of students or for the benefit of faculty? I think you know on which side I would land on that particular one. Think about that one long and hard as you think about how you function as a college district. All right, again, let me pause. Create a culture for change and transformation. What thoughts have I stimulated? What questions would you raise? What do you think about being willing to be overseeing change and transformation? What gets in the way? What inhibits? Please. I think we have a microphone. We can probably get to you right here in the middle.
I would have appreciate your comments that might address how reactionary education is as to how progressive it is. So when you talk about change, you can have change for the sake of change, or how are we going to take education and move it to the other side of the power curve? We're always on the backside. We're reacting and providing solutions, and we need to be preparing prior to the need. And I'd like to have your comments on that.
Which is why I started with the first comment a few minutes ago. Doing what you do, bringing about the change that you create on the basis of the vision for the future that takes into account how you serve your service area effectively, how you deal with student success with equity, and the willingness to look at data about whether or not you're making that progress. I am never for change for the sake of change. Never, ever. But if you go through the process of really thinking about what is most important for 2021 and 2022, if we don't do anything other than the 3 priorities that we agree to or the 5 priorities that we agree to, if that's all we do, what are they? And if we do them, we will be about the process of creating change and transformation if we're together on the right issues. And we've had the background presented and discussed and massaged in whatever way we need to massage it. So it's an intentional planning process within which we identify what is most important, and as we begin to pursue what's most important, take on the courageous conversations we need to have to bring about the right change. Now, that's my initial reaction to you. If I'm not responding to your question, jump back in.
My real concern is that because of the speed in which our lives and technology and change is moving, if we're only focusing on 21 and 22, 23 is going to be something we're not prepared for.
That's right.
And 24 and 25.
You're right.
And so to me, I think we need to spend more time with professional demographers. We really need to know more about what people in that other space are thinking about 3 years, 5 years from now, especially when it comes to facilities and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, to build a 4-story building when you need to build a foundation for 6 and shell out 2.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's enough of that being thought about.
Well, I appreciate what you're saying, and I agree with what you're saying. Without any question, I agree with what you've just said. And so that might argue for, name the year, a 5-year strategic plan, a 10-year strategic plan, but with a very carefully crafted annual update that allows you to say, if we don't do anything else in the year ahead, these are the things we've got to do first to move us in the direction we know we've got to go. And to do that annual update, that annual refinement that allows us to always stay on target based on the emerging understandings that we have about the way the world is changing, about the way our service area is changing, about the needs that have shifted in our particular service area. So thank you for your observation. You're absolutely on target from where I sit and from where I've worked for over a half a century trying to bring that about. Very, very helpful. Thank you. Who else has an observation or a question that we've triggered here? All right. Then I will move ahead if you're ready. This idea of monitoring what matters. Cynthia talked about that a little while ago, and I started using that terminology a few years ago, trying to get people's attention. Now, what that implies is that you know what matters first, and then that you're willing to create a culture in which you inquire, you seek evidence, you are willing to be held accountable. All of that is a part of that culture that we hope you are a party to creating. Years ago, we started talking about a culture of evidence, and then we added to that this idea of a culture of inquiry, and finally we added a few years ago the idea that we ought to all be held accountable for the choices that we've made and the actions that we've taken. But please understand that great boards create that culture. Great boards do it in concert with their CEO. And I don't know many CEOs who don't appreciate the kind of boards that do that because they then create the climate within which a CEO can do tough work. It is very comforting to a chief executive to know that the board is really serious about undertaking the outcome that they think is desirable over the long haul. And it provides some cover sometimes for a CEO when the board makes visible what's happening. And as I say that, I'm looking at Yvonne Katz there at the Alamo table, and I'm thinking about a time many years ago after we'd done some work in a trustee institute and where I'd done a retreat with the Alamo board, and I was working in Uvalde, Texas. And I got up one morning, and the only newspaper that was available in Uvalde, Texas was the San Antonio newspaper, the Morning News. And headline story about the Alamo board making a decision about taking on equity and bringing about systematic change. Front page story of the local newspaper. That was enormous. That was enormous. I wish I could remember what year that was. Maybe one of the folks at the Alamo table could remember what year that was. But that was a declaration to everybody in that system that board was serious about transformational change. And they were willing for it to be on the front page of the newspaper. That's creating a culture. And even though there might be faculty members who'd begin to grumble and rumble, to say, now wait a minute, they're talking about changing the way I do my work. It reinforces a CEO who then works with people all across the board to begin to do courageous work, to really begin to take on serious change in a way that benefits students. This one is critical. And it's not a one-time thing. It is a culture that we continue to build. As changes occur and as we assess whether or not the changes that we undertook were really significant, if they brought about the change we hoped for, we got to be big enough to say we tried something and it didn't work. And let's say, okay, it didn't work, but let's take the next step with what we think will work. And that kind of give and take with a culture defined by and reinforced by a board creates great latitude for a CEO and all the folks who work with him or her to bring about the kind of change that we have to bring about in order to help more students in our respective communities. Awfully, awfully important. Look at number 2 there. Have you adopted a limited set of metrics to monitor what matters? Now again, as I say that, I have vivid experiences that pop up in my head after working with colleges all around the land. And I remember one college where a board for the first time was going to begin to talk about data. And the institutional researcher brought the data to a board meeting. And it was about a 4-inch stack of printouts. And I laughed, and I shouldn't have, but I did, because that solves nothing. It overwhelms and solves nothing. So the question here is, thinking about your future, thinking about the path you've set for yourselves, what metrics do you need to monitor that get at what matters most? Certainly those priorities that I've already been trying to reinforce. Are we monitoring what matters relative to the priorities that we have set for ourselves? And then what other metrics do we need to have to deal with some of the more routine things that we know we need to monitor? But I'm really thrilled when I go to a college somewhere and the number of metrics that they monitor regularly doesn't get beyond 10 or 12. I'm really happy to see that. If in fact that came as a result of the conversations that led to that, where people agree that we're going to do these things no matter what, because the students are the ones who will benefit if we do it well. So a set of metrics that allow you to monitor regularly how it's going. I'll tell you about one that I started to use a few years ago that bothered people a bit. But it's the example that I'll pull out and use for just a moment. Of all those students who express an interest in being enrolled in your colleges, from whatever date that begins to happen for, let's say, a fall term, what % of them are actually enrolled in classes on whatever the census date is? Is it still the 12th class day in Texas? So on the 12th class day, of all those who set out to be enrolled, what % of them are enrolled in classes on the census date? And when I've been able to push a college to answer that question, I find percentages anywhere from 25 to 50% of those who wanted to be there are actually there. You with me there? Think about the people in your service area who need you, who need to be successful in your colleges, and if their result is that they stuck their nose out, they took the steps they needed to take to try and be enrolled, and then they didn't succeed for whatever reason. And so the question is, why? What went wrong? What got in their way? What barriers did you erect that made it impossible for them to be gainfully engaged and to be enrolled in classes? And the second one that kind of goes with that would be, of all those who are enrolled on the 12th class day, what % of them by the end of the term have 0 credits? Tough one, but another example of what you need to know. And if you disaggregate the data on both, what do you find in your service area? These are powerful questions, powerful issues for you to grapple with and powerful things for you to monitor as you move ahead. And there'll be lots more talk about the metrics before we're through, and it's not my purpose to get us fully off on the metric conversation right now, but I want you to realize the importance of deciding on a limited set that you're serious about monitoring. And that maybe annually you revise those based on new priorities that might have emerged. Now, look at this next one. Do you understand the characteristics of the students who are coming to you? And again, I hope you're making a note to yourself on each one of these so you'll have things to talk about when you get together in your college groups later in the sessions. The characteristics of new students. How is that changing over time? There are many colleges that have seen an enormous shift in that. And I can recall at least one college in this room where in a board retreat we really talked seriously about the realities of the shifting population in a service area, dramatically shifting population. And a lot of board members at that point were unaware of the extent to which a particular population group was burgeoning while others were shrinking. And so it's important to be in touch with the students who are entering your colleges each year. How's that changing? And how does that impact their success rates? And as you're doing that, to maybe also ask a companion question is, who are we still missing in our service area? We don't even get enrolled in the college. So what are the characteristics of these folks who are choosing to become involved with us? Awfully important set of questions to ask there. And this is an example of a great study session for a board to have. A 30-minute study session focused on the new students for 21-22 or 22-23, whatever the year is. How have they shifted? Who are the new people that we're now reaching? How is that impacting the way we plan? How is it impacting the way we deliver services? All right, number 4 here. Do you hear and discuss reports on the progression of students through the college? I see some heads nodding yes, and where heads are nodding yes, terrific. But if the answer is no, or you're not quite there yet, make a note on your page and have that conversation while you're here during the breakout times that we have for team conversation. You need to be aware, as early as I was talking about a minute ago, how many people wanted to be here and didn't make it, even though they had the courage to step out and try to be there? And how many took the step and didn't get any credits in their first term? But beyond that, how many of them earn 6 or 9 or 12 credits during the first term? And how many complete their mathematics in their first year? And on that goes. How are students progressing with disaggregated data? Always disaggregated data. This is critical. This is, again, a great topic for a work session, a great topic for a retreat, carefully crafted and created in such a way that board members really have a feeling for what's happening and where are we failing in our onboarding process to deal with certain groups of people. And I just, as I said that, what popped into my head from the California experience I had during the last year with the pandemic. Think about a poor area with high numbers of people of color, low-income families who did not have a computer, did not have Wi-Fi with the pandemic. What happens to them? What happened to them during the pandemic? There were colleges all over California ensuring that all of the parking lots that they had provided access to Wi-Fi. And they, in many cases, found community partners who would ensure that their students had access to Wi-Fi. And if they didn't have a computer, access to a loan at any given moment so that students didn't get behind in the virtual classes that they had to take. Those are the kind of issues that you've got to be sensitive to, and nothing could be more dramatic than the pandemic. I mean, I don't have to tell you that. You've lived through it. What an enormous upside-down experience that was for everybody, and still is in so many places. But our interest ought to always be, what is the impact on our students? and on their ability to succeed. And what is it that we can do to ensure that even though we're facing a pandemic, they can still get what they need when they need it? That's an awfully important conversation for you to have. And then finally, as you look to the bottom of that, you see the question, do you periodically discuss results on leading indicators of student success with equity? It's amazing how long it took the community college world to come to grips with the need for equity. I'm amazed, quite frankly, at how long it took for us to be able to grapple with that issue. As a school kid, I remember vividly the experience I had in San Antonio, Texas. I attended an elementary school where the majority of the students were Mexican American. That's the way they referred to themselves. That's the way we all talked about them. I think back on what they suffered as they tried to progress. And I went through school with a bunch of them, all the way through high school graduation. And as I watched people drop by the wayside, moving along. And if we don't take regular looks at who's dropping by the wayside and why, we're not going to begin to have the kind of impact that we need to have. And the other image that I have is I share that example with you. As I was a fifth grader, the teacher in that fifth grade decided to put students in seats related to their place in the class. The person with the highest grade was in seat number 1. The person with the lowest grade was in seat number 36. I'm not exaggerating. That was my fifth grade experience in San Antonio, Texas. Now, I was a lucky person. I was always in seat number 1, and that's where my parents expected me to be. But I also got to know Josie, who was in seat number 36. And she had no chance. The teacher had no expectation for her to succeed. That's criminal. Now, I only realized that a few years later, but that was criminal. And we've got to understand that as we come to grips with student success, we really can't say we have student success without equity, period. So what are the steps that need to be taken, boards and CEOs, in order to ensure that we have achieved equity? That is an ongoing process. We're never through with that work. But are we taking it seriously, and are we talking about whether or not we're making progress in that vein? Awfully, awfully important, board members. And again, a great topic for a study session, a great topic for a retreat. I know many of you have done that, and I applaud you anytime you do that. But it's important to realize that we will not achieve it unless we monitor it, unless we're going to talk about all the things that are not easy to talk about. And I have to tell you, I'm horrified by what I'm seeing going on in America today on this front. Watching the news just a day or two ago about a school system in Pennsylvania that's removing everything in their library that has anything to do with race and ethnicity and student success for people who are less well-informed, less well-educated, low-income families, anything about the need for equity for those populations being eliminated from the library, being eliminated from course syllabi. Anything that has the name critical race theory is dead before arrival in so many communities around America. So I'm horrified by what's happening in America. And in the midst of that, how do you as a college board, working with your CEO, ensure that you are seriously talking about whatever the issues are that need to be had in order for you to begin to achieve equity? Nothing more important for America than for that to happen. Well, I'm beginning to get on the soapbox, and I don't mean to do that. By my watch, we have 10 minutes now, and if we don't take all 10 minutes, I don't think Cynthia will be the least bit upset. But stop and think about these points that we've made. I hope you've made notes to yourselves about each one of them. But what troubles you about what I'm saying? Is there anything I've said that you think is inappropriate? Is there anything I've said that creates a barrier that you don't think you can approach? Let's open it up for a few minutes and talk to each other about what I'm asserting are actions you can take to be an effective board that creates great colleges for the future, for all the people who need your services. What does this prompt? Please, got a hand over here, if we can get a microphone. Thank you.
From attending conferences, from being on the Midland College Board for quite a few years, it became apparent, and also from my small grandchildren that are in elementary school, my 2 granddaughters that have gone to a Texas university. Why, and this was not the case when I was growing up, why is math so difficult for people? Or is that a whole new conference?
I think, where's Martha Ellis? Where's Martha? Give Martha the microphone. She spent a lot of time at the Dana Center working on these issues in Texas. What's the answer to that, Martha?
I'm not sure I have the exact answer to that. I think one of the things that we realized is the math that most of us went through was appropriate at the time for us, but it is not appropriate for the world in which we live today. And therefore the relevance was not there, and it didn't make any sense, and it wasn't being applied, and so you took a course that had no impact on your life or your future career, and hence the realm of the math pathways where math became relevant and important to you. But math had not kept up with the changing world, and so what was appropriate for us was not appropriate for the students that were currently, what they need for their future careers. And so it was time for basically a revolution in mathematics.
Thank you, Martha. And again, I want to reinforce the commendation that I sent your way a while ago. Folks, realize you're not through, but Texas community colleges have made great progress on helping more students succeed in mathematics. Feel good about that and realize you've still got work to do. I saw a couple of hands over here now. Please.
I'm a kindergarten teacher by trade. Been in education for 50 years. Math starts at the very low levels of pre-K and K. And it needs to start with concrete materials. I think, and I was a product of a system where I had a hard time with math because we were told how to do it, but we weren't shown concretely what it looked like. And I think that's the failure, that we're given the numbers, we're told how to solve it, but we don't understand it. So I think eventually it catches up with us.
Thank you for adding that. Saw another hand right there.
This may be an ignorant question, but it's more ignorant if I don't ask it. Is there data indicating which has more impact for our students, ethnic equity or socioeconomic status?
I didn't catch the first part of that. Socioeconomic status.
Is there data indicating which has a more profound effect on a student, the socioeconomic status or the ethnicity?
I guess I'm not fully getting it, and I'm not hearing all of what you're saying.
How can I say?
Could somebody help me?
So, I'll try again.
Are the data supporting
the data,
that they're doing better over time?
No, what does the data show? Is it a socioeconomic status? Is it poverty, or is it ethnic inequity?
I'm just having a hard time hearing. There is no question that low-income families, students from low-income families, start with a huge disadvantage. I don't have any doubt about that at all. And I don't see that as in any way related to race or ethnicity, in my experience. It has more to do with the lack of income. And I'm one of those who came from a low-income family. I went to work when I was 12. And if I wanted anything, a bicycle, a baseball glove, a new shirt, I bought it myself with money I earned. And so I came out of a family that was low income. No one from my family had ever gone to college, and so on. And I was in a school with people who were even lower income than I was. And as I say, I watched the attrition of those folks. Out of people I knew well in elementary school, less than 25% of them graduated from high school. So what happened to all of them? They were all low income. Unfortunately, they were also people of color, but that is horrifying when you see that happen, but it's more related, in my view, to low income and the opportunity that is missed than anything else. Can we address that? Absolutely we can. And in my experience, I recall spending about a decade working really hard at the elementary school level in a community where I was CEO to begin to enrich things for students at the elementary school level. And we started programs for their parents at the elementary school level to begin to try and reverse things over time. But there are colleges in this room that have taken this on head on and are making an enormous difference to address the fact that people come with disadvantages, but they don't accept that as a reason for not helping those students succeed. But low income to me is the biggest factor. Does that help? Thank you, thank you. And I apologize for not catching all of that. All right, who else has an observation? Yes, over
I've
here.
got a question. All right.
Thank you.
All right. You touched on something towards the end of your talk about school taking out anything that mentioned critical race theory, which we all know is a political third rail. So how do we address student success with equity without touching that rail?
One of the most productive experiences that I've had as a professional is working with colleges that said, we're going to figure out how to have the conversation. And I prepared a set of materials, and I'm not sure of the status of this, that will be in a booklet or in a website for trustees over the long haul. Cynthia, could you? It'll be a handbook. And in that handbook, I use an actual example of a college's effort to say, here's what we're going to try and do relative to all the issues around race and ethnicity and equity. And it's about a half-page statement that is powerful. And I included that as an example of the kind of conversation that needs to be held and the agreements that need to be made before you really go to work on trying to solve the problems. But it takes serious, difficult conversation. And a lot of people are afraid to have the conversation in the first place. It's hard to have the conversation, but we've got to find ways to do that. And as I say that, I'm recalling an experience that I had with a particular faculty member in a college years and years ago, African-American woman who was just spectacular in the work she did. And a student in her class stood up and assaulted her verbally because of her ethnicity, her race, her gender, and she stopped the class, and for the next 2 or 3 weeks, they talked about nothing but that issue and what it felt like to be hit that way and what it meant to the person who said it, what it meant to her as the recipient of that, and how do we begin to have that conversation at the classroom level. Dramatic improvement that came just a few weeks into that conversation. So magnify that from a single classroom to an entire college campus or to an entire college district. That conversation takes courage, takes real courage, and it takes leadership that is creative and willing to take some lumps along the way. But we have to have the conversation, for starters. We have to agree that we want to overcome the difficulties, for starters. And I'm recalling, I apologize for just taking the examples that come to mind, but I was working with a college just a couple of years ago where after a 2-day session, representative from all the colleges, all the campuses, it was an eight campus system, people were actually in tears at the end of 2.5 days of talking about it. Literally people breaking down in tears. One of them who cried first was 6'6", African-American guy who looked as tough as anybody you'd ever see on a line for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He was crying, talking about what life had been like for him as a young boy and as a teenager and as a college student. You've got to be willing to shed some tears. You've got to be willing to take some lumps. You've got to be willing to have some tough, courageous conversations, for starters. And then to set some targets for how you're going to develop a different kind of culture, a different kind of climate in which we can do this work. Does that help at all? Say more if you want me take off on another response? Thank you. Who else?
I have
I've
one
got
here.
1 minute.
Perhaps I'm the last one. I just have an observation. I really love that question about ethnicity and poverty. And what I would just like to share is that when you're dealing with poverty and you're compounding that with ethnicity, there is something called privilege. And with privilege brings about certain opportunities. And so it can be compounded. So the challenge here is looking beyond and figuring out what can we do to compensate for the privileges that are not given to certain ethnic groups.
Thank you for that. And you're going to have the last word. Folks, you've been great. Thank you for your time and attention.
Oh, and I wish we'd had 5 more minutes because I had a question, Byron, because I know you have a really great story about a board who had the back of a president so that they could have these courageous conversations. You probably have more than one, but one's coming to my mind with Dan Phelan. So I hope that we'll have an opportunity to continue this conversation, and you will, and I'm going to tell you exactly how we're going to orchestrate the rest of the day. But there is a role for the board, a very important role for the board. A CEO cannot step out and have those courageous conversations by themselves. It has to be the collective of the board and the CEO making the decision to have those hard conversations. So thank you for being here to talk about that. And here's how we're going to do this. So I told you when we first got in here that this is not a random set of conversations that we're asking you to have, but rather we are orchestrating a set of conversations. So you're going to take what you've been thinking in this session with you into the next session. So here's the way the rest of the day is going to go. You're getting ready to go out to concurrent sessions. So there's 2 kinds of, for those of you who have not been to a BOTI before that's orchestrated like this, there's 2 kinds of concurrent or breakout sessions. One set of concurrents are set up so that you can have conversations with your colleagues about the hard conversations you're having and the victories that you're gaining because of the hard choices you've made. And then there are breakouts where it's just your team, where you get to talk just with the folks from your college so that you can make plans for what you're going to take home from Saturday afternoon. So what we're going to do next is the concurrent session. So you have 3 choices. My suggestion to you is that your teams break up and you have somebody who's going to each one of these sessions, if you have enough folks here to do that. I know some of you have more than enough. And that you go there to listen for what is the connective tissue between the conversation you had here, what you had in the concurrent session, and what you're going to take to your team tomorrow. And so I want you to look at these 3 topics. We have some of the best experts in the country who have been working with colleges all over the country who have things to share with you, important messages. So think about who wants to talk about how we are supporting a culture of change in each of these 3 sessions. And then this evening, we have some special fun planned. So we will have a reception and a band and a cash bar so you can come and be with each other. We'll wear our masks, we'll bump our elbows, and we'll have a good time. And then we will have dinner in this room. Belle Whelan will be with us. I know many of you know Belle, and we can talk to her more about the kinds of conversations that we've had this morning. So please enjoy your concurrent session, then we'll see you back here for the reception. Enjoy.